I'm still thinking about Captain America Brave New World. And as I think about it, I keep coming back to this idea of superhero fatigue. Because as I said in my review of the movie that I posted earlier, Captain America Brave New World itself is not a bad movie. It's gotten some bad reviews, it's gotten some bad reactions from fans, but I found it to be just a run-of-the-mill, underwhelming kind of mediocre superhero movie. Not a travesty, not anything worth getting really worked up or upset about. Parts of it are good, parts of it are fine. Overall, it's just kind of a shrug of a movie. Like, oh, well, okay, that's fine, I guess. But it has been used as the latest example, and its sort of underperformance critically and commercially has been used as the latest example of superhero fatigue. People are tired of superhero movies. And I saw a really excellent article on the AV Club earlier today by Caroline Sita, who is a really, really excellent film and pop culture writer whose work you may have seen on the AV Club or other websites before. And she wrote an article called "To Save the Superhero Movie, We Need to Bring Back Themes." And I read that, and that got me thinking about some other things as well. So I just want to read you a little bit of that article, and then we'll talk a little bit more. Here is Caroline Sita. Quote, "Marvel once understood what filmmakers like Richard Donner and Sam Raimi long ago proved. More than any other genre, superhero stories are built around archetypal characters engaging in ideological battles meant to reflect something larger about the human condition. That means they need driving central themes to elevate their sometimes thin individual components into something greater than the sum of their parts. Superman the movie, for instance, is about what it means to be a good man. Donner utilizes a sunny nobility for the film's tone, combining epic world-building with silly screwball comedy to reflect the central division of Superman's secret identity. Since Supes is an all-powerful god who simply wants to be a selfless person, he does battle with a greedy, selfish man who wants to refashion the world like a god. Raimi's Spider-Man movies, meanwhile, are about learning that life is a whole lot harder and more complicated than you think it is when you're a kid. So, Raimi's Peter Parker has to battle his corrupt male mentors, all while the bright color palette, heightened melodrama, and on-the-nose puberty metaphors capture the heightened way teenagers experience the world. And Sita continues explaining how all of that relates to Captain America Brave New World. In fact, not only does Brave New World lack a strong central idea, it suffers from a glut of small, scattered ones working at odds against one another. The movie's main emotional arc belongs not to its title character, but to Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, Harrison Ford, a general turned president, seeking redemption for his more militant past. An even more inexplicable Incredible Hulk returning player is Tim Blake Nelson as Dr. Samuel Stearns, perhaps the most thematically muddled element of the entire film. He mostly exists because Captain America Brave New World wants to have a shadowy, behind-the-scenes manipulator character, but if you squint, his motives seem to be a mix of personal revenge against Ross and a just want to watch the world burn love of statistically predictable chaos. Sure. And I highly recommend that you go check out Caroline Sita's entire article that I've been quoting from. It's linked in the description. It's really well done, and it reflects a lot of my own thinking on this topic and has also helped me to focus my own thinking on this topic for this video. And she hits at one of the things that it's not the only reason, but it's maybe the main reason for me why the new Captain America movie ends up feeling so underwhelming. And that is that it ultimately feels hollow at its center. It feels like it doesn't really have anything substantive to say about what happens in it or with what happens in it. The main villain, by the way, I'm going to get into some spoilers here, so I'm not going to go out of my way to spoil a whole bunch of stuff in the movie, but if you haven't seen the movie and you were planning to, just heads up, there's going to be some spoiler-ish stuff as I continue talking here, but the main villain of the movie winds up being Samuel Stearns, also known as the leader in the comics, although I don't think he's ever called the leader in the movie, which is fine. I'm not complaining about that. The movies can deviate from the comics as much as they want. I don't care, as long as they're good movies. But Stearns ends up being the main villain, and then you have Thunderbolt Ross, who is now the president, who is kind of in an antagonist role. And they have only very tenuous connections to Captain America, Sam Wilson, who is nominally the hero of the movie, the lead character. And those are tenuous connections in terms of plot and also in terms of theme. I mentioned in my review video, sometimes it feels like Sam is only involved in this story because he was the one who was kind of on call when all of these things happened. It doesn't feel so much like a Captain America story, but like a story that happens to involve Captain America in some ways. It feels like it has a few things that it wants to say. It doesn't actually end up saying anything, but it feels like it wants to say things sometimes about Sam, about how he as a black man relates to the role of Captain America and to the United States government, about General Ross, or President Ross now, and his obsession with legacy and personal redemption, and how that obsession becomes a threat to peace in the United States and the rest of the world, and leaves him vulnerable to being manipulated by dangerous people. But it never actually says anything. There's no coherent, unifying idea to tie these characters or this story together and give it resonance. There's a part of the movie late in the film, after basically it's sort of the epilogue or the denouement, after everything has been resolved and President Ross has turned into the Red Hulk and subsequently been defeated by Captain America, and all of his sort of treacherous behavior and behind the scenes illegal wheeling, dealing, and sort of devil's deal with the leader, and all of that has been exposed and revealed, and now President Ross is no longer president, and he is in prison. He's at the Raft, which is like the MCU's superpowered superhero prison, and there's an exchange of dialogue between him and Sam, where Sam gives President Ross credit for owning up to his mistakes. For after the Red Hulk goes on the rampage and everybody realizes, oh, gee, I think something might be up with the president, you guys. Ross admits his wrongdoing, admits what he's done, and accepts responsibility for it. And in a better movie, in a more coherent movie, that would feel like a very pointed and very meaningful bit of political commentary. A president who commits a whole bunch of crimes for incredibly self-serving reasons, instead of denying it and using the power of his office to escape responsibility for it, like a certain real-world president, he accepts responsibility and takes his medicine, and therefore achieves a kind of moral redemption as a result of that. Now, I know that Donald Trump was not actually president for the second time yet while this movie was being made, but his criminal charges and his trials and various other court proceedings were very much ongoing, and it was obvious that Trump was not interested at all in admitting anything that he did or taking any wrongdoing for anything or taking any sort of punishment for any wrongdoing that he was guilty of, right? So in a better movie, in a more coherent movie, that would feel like a really timely bit of political commentary, what the way they play Ross in the same situation. But because the movie doesn't really have that strong center, because it doesn't really seem to have a coherent message or a coherent voice, it's hard to tell. I mean, I feel like it probably is there on purpose, but there's no gravitas behind it. There's no weight behind it. It doesn't feel like this is part of the point of the movie. It just feels like one of a bunch of other little things that the movie is kind of sort of trying to say. And that's a shame. When you're dealing with movies, feature films, to me, and this, again, this is, a lot of people feel this way, and it's sort of taken as conventional wisdom, but I happen to agree with it, and I've said many times before, for me, just philosophically, I think that when it comes to storytelling, form should dictate content to a certain degree. Not absolutely, but to a certain degree. So for me, when you're talking about a movie and telling a story in a movie, that's different than if you were telling stories in another format, like, for instance, a weekly TV show or a monthly comic book. If you're telling stories in monthly comics or a traditionally structured episodic TV show where, for the most part, every episode is its own self-contained story, not every story needs to have those strong thematic ties to the main character. You can get away with doing case of the week or case of the month type stories. In fact, you can not only get away with it, but some of those stories can be really, really terrific. How many TV shows like The X-Files, one of my favorite shows ever, how many episodes of The X-Files are just absolute classics, and it's Mulder and Scully investigating a case that has really little or nothing to do with them personally, and has little or nothing to do with, like, the big alien invasion myth arc of the series, but it's a great episode because it's a great story in its own right. And it's Mulder and Scully investigating a mystery or investigating some awesome, clever, cunning, involving, engrossing supernatural story. You know, those kinds of stories in a weekly TV show or a monthly comic book can be really, really great. But when you make a movie, and it's a movie that, even if it involves a character like a superhero character where you're hoping you get to bring them back and to make more movies about this character and revisit this world and these stories, even if that's the case, you're going to make, what, a movie every few years? If you're lucky, if your series is successful enough to warrant multiple sequels, you make one of these every 2, 3, or 4 years. And if you're really lucky and it's really successful, maybe you get to make 4 or 5 of them, right? In that case, the plot should connect to the characters in a really meaningful way. The themes, the things the movie is about, should connect to the characters, especially the lead character, the lead protagonist, Captain America, Sam Wilson in this case, in meaningful ways. The story of the movie should be about the lead character. And it should also be about more than just what is literally happening on screen. And sometimes that means political commentary or social commentary, but it doesn't have to mean that. It can also mean more broad literary themes, philosophical themes, human themes. It can be about friendship or family or forgiveness or something that begins with an entirely different letter. It doesn't have to be political or social political or social commentary, but it needs to be about something. And there's potential for this kind of story in Captain America Brave New World. We have the Cap and Isaiah Bradley relationship. Isaiah Bradley is kind of a mentor figure to Sam, and Isaiah being a previous Captain America, a previous Black Captain America, who in his youth was denied and erased from history and sent to prison wrongly, unjustly, and was the subject of government experimentation and, you know, all sorts of other horrible things, with lots of historical parallels to mistreatment of Black people in real American history. And in this movie, he is again implicated in a crime unjustly, a crime that he technically does commit but is not in his right mind for, is forced into doing. So he's once again imprisoned unjustly, and Cap goes rogue, slightly, sort of, to try and clear Isaiah's name. Like, that is in the movie. There's also the relationship, the mentor-student or teacher-student relationship between Sam and the new Falcon, Joaquin Torres, and their friendship, and how Torres is seriously injured during one of the big action set pieces. And Sam could feel partly responsible for that, could feel like he's the one who got Torres into this. There's the tension between Sam and President Ross, and Ross trying to use Cap and the Captain America name to rebuild the Avengers. And to do that, and he says, I want to do it for the good of the American people and for the good of the world, but it's clear that he wants to do that as a piece of trying to secure his own personal legacy as president and to sort of redeem himself for the guilt he feels for actions that he took previously in his military career. Ross having that dark secret, Ross having behaved unethically in the past, and done so for very self-serving reasons, to preserve his own life, to preserve his own legacy, and then endangering the country and the world in the process as a result of those selfish, unethical actions. And then Cap having to be the one to uncover the truth and to save the day. A powerful, old, legacy-obsessed white man confronted by a black man who is Captain America and who, as Captain America, is still being expected to prove himself and to justify being the guy to carry that shield because he is a black man in the United States, and that extra expectation is just put on him. That sounds like a decent concept for a Captain America movie, for a Sam Wilson Captain America movie. And again, all of that stuff is in the movie to a certain degree, but the movie doesn't actually feel like it's about any of that, or that it's actually about the character of Sam in any meaningful way. And the frustrating thing about this is you can do all of the things I've just been suggesting. You can make a movie that connects meaningfully in thematic ways to its characters and to its plot and to what's happening. You can do all of that and still make a really exciting, action-packed, superhero adventure movie. Big tent, blockbuster popcorn movie, the kind of movie that I know Marvel Studios and Disney wants to make that'll bring in the crowds and make a ton of money. You can still have the high-flying dogfights and the climactic showdown between Captain America and the Red Hulk, or maybe some other villain with a more personal connection to Sam Wilson, or maybe the Red Hulk. Like, the Red Hulk could have worked and could have fit better thematically into the movie if it had been written in a different way, if Sam and Sam's relationship with Ross had been centered a lot more than it is in the movie that we got. Like, you could still do all of that and make the movie be about more than what is literally happening on screen. It's been done before. It's been done in the MCU before. It's been done in the MCU in movies that have made a whole lot of money before. So it's not as though what I'm suggesting or what Caroline is suggesting in her article, or what anybody who has said these same kinds of things for years is suggesting would make it impossible to make big, popular blockbuster movies. You can do both. I would argue that you should do both. But the first step in making those kinds of movies for the MCU or the DCU or any other big sci-fi action-adventure franchise, the first step of making those kinds of movies is to realize that you should be trying to make those kinds of movies. Superhero fatigue. That's what we're told whenever a movie like this underperforms. It's superhero fatigue. You know the best way to combat superhero fatigue? Make good superhero movies. Because if you show people a good movie, regardless of genre, that's all they really want. And how do you do that? How do you make good superhero movies? Well, just speaking very generally, you have to do more than just showing people superheroes doing superhero shit. That by itself is not enough. Whatever novelty the genre on the big screen may once have had is long gone. People want more than just seeing superheroes doing superhero shit on screen. Meaningless spectacle, no matter how epic and overblown and awesome, is not going to be enough for most people. Ultimately, people connect with superhero movies for the same reason they connect with every other kind of movie. If you want to keep the audience's interest, you have to make movies that tell stories that are about their characters in meaningful ways and that have things to say about something: society, politics, the human experience. If you're making superheroes that don't do that, if you're making superhero movies that are just empty spectacle, that are just superheroes on screen doing superhero shit, that don't even try to tell stories that are about anything deeper and more meaningful, then you're not really telling stories. You're playing with dolls. And if I want to play with dolls, I've got that covered on this end. Okay? I don't need movies to be playing with dolls to entertain me. I can do that all by myself if that's what I want. The value of superhero stories and of fantasy in general, in all of its many different forms, is that it allows us to tell stories that are about incredible, impossible things and about ourselves and our world and our lives at the same time. What's happening on the screen could never happen literally, but thematically, philosophically, emotionally, it rings true. It's a simple lesson, and maybe that's why it's so easily forgotten. Yes, use superheroes to entertain us, to thrill us, to amaze us. But if you're not also using them to tell us something about ourselves, to show us who we are or who we ought to be, why should we care?